Hey guys, I'm not feeling well today, so I am at home. So, we are going to finish up these last two problems of this lesson from Halloween. And then you are going to do the evens on the Unit 5 Day 2 homework. So after this, I'm just going to continue on to the next lesson. So you can pause me and do that homework, or you can just keep on going straight through with your notes, whatever works for you. So you can do evens on Unit 5, Day 2, and you are going to do odds on Unit 5, Day 3. So that way I'm not being mean, you're still getting just one assignment. Evens of one, odds of the other. Alright, fantastic. So, we were on this problem right here in the middle. So, if you notice, all three of these sides right here are congruent. So, what that tells me is that it is equilateral. And remember, if we knew it was equilateral, that means it also is equiangular. And if you go back and look up in your notes a little bit, we have, remember there's 180 degrees in a triangle divided among your three angles. Each of my angles in an equilateral equiangular triangle is going to be 60 degrees. So I know this is going, this is going to be 60 right here. This is going to be 60 right here. And this is going to be 60 right here. So what we've got right now is x equals 60. So now we're going to have to start going and looking for y. Be sure to pause me whenever I'm on something that allows me to write a little bit quicker than I would on a Wacom tablet. So feel free to pause me. Okay, so right here we've got a line, right? Alright, so we know a line makes 180 degrees. So if I take 180 minus this 60, right here, I'm going to get 120 for that angle right there. Alright. So, now I know these two sides are going to be congruent. So remember, whenever I have two sides congruent, if you go across the triangle from those congruent sides are going to be your congruent angles. So the angle with the y and the little blank angle are going to be congruent. And since they're congruent, if one of them is y, the other one is going to be y. So to solve for y real quick, I'm going to have 120 plus y equals 180. Combine like terms, y plus y gives me 2y equals 180. Subtract 120 from both sides. So 2y will equal 60. Divide by 2, and y is equal to 30. Alright. Trying to figure out how to not make that weird noise. If I can make it stop somehow. Okay. Here we go. Alright. Very last one on this lesson. Okay, so we're looking for x. We know these two sides right here are going to be congruent. So across from these two sides are going to be my congruent angles. So this blank angle over here on the left And then this angle over here on the right next to that 150, the exterior angle. Now, since exterior angles are formed from a line extended out, we know this is going to make a full line right here. So remember, this is going to be 180 degrees. If I take 180 minus 50, I'm going to get 30 right here for this angle. So since that bottom right angle is 30, because of these congruent angles down here on the base, this angle here on the left, since that's 30, on the right, this angle here on the left is also going to be 30. So then we will solve for x. So all the angles of a triangle add up to 180. So I'm going to have x plus 30 plus 30. Why won't that do that? There we go. Equals 180. Combine like terms. 30 plus 30 is 60. Equals 180. Subtract 60 from both sides, and I'm going to get 120 for that angle right there. Another way we could have looked at that is if you remember that exterior angle theorem. This angle plus this angle is going to be equal to my exterior angle. Remember, these are the remote interiors. So we could have done 30 plus x equals 150. Subtracted 30, and x would equal 120. So it's just another way to think about it. That's one of the things I like about math, is that there's different ways to solve different problems. So, anyways, you can pause me and do that homework and then come back to me. Or if you just want to go ahead and charge through and do all the notes in one thing and then, work on the homework for the second part of class, go for it. So, here comes congruent figures. So, if you remember back in Unit 2, that's when we started talking about transformations. And we only talked about isometric transformations. And if you remember, I beat it into your head, or at least I tried my best to, that an isometric transformation, it doesn't change size or shape, right? So isometric transformations create these congruent figures, because congruent figures have the exact same size and shape. So those size, that congruence and all of that, that's why we did all of those transformations. And now we're talking about congruent figures. That's why we did that together. So, corresponding parts. So, when we're talking about comparing two different triangles, and we're talking about corresponding parts, the biggest thing to remember is that they are going to be in the same spot. So, over here, A is going to be corresponding to D. And with congruent figures, all of their corresponding parts are going to be congruent. So, B and E, those two angles are corresponding, and C and F, those two angles are corresponding. And then we can also talk about it with sides. AB is corresponding with DE. Over here, BC is corresponding with EF. And AC is corresponding with DF. So, when we're talking about congruent figures, the most important thing about them, or if you wanted to break it down into two words, or a few words that explain what congruent figures are have all pairs of corresponding parts congruent. Ooh, that's probably really hard to see. Let's try a different color. All the pairs of corresponding parts are congruent in congruent figures. So that's the most important part. So just like we marked everything earlier. Come on. There we go. All of those parts that we marked congruent earlier are now going to be congruent since corresponding parts are congruent. Now this last theorem comes in handy a lot for this unit and for the next unit. So the third angle theorem, if two angles of two triangles are congruent, then the third pair are also congruent. So basically, if I know that like angle D and angle A are congruent, and angle B and angle E, for example, are congruent, then the third angles are congruent, meaning that C is congruent, angle C is congruent to angle F. So that's going to come in handy a little bit later when we can only prove that two angles are congruent. But since we know that two angles are congruent, then the third one is going to be as well. Okay, moving on. So, given triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, label the diagram, find the corresponding parts. Alright, so this right here, I'm just going to highlight it for just a second. This right here is called a congruent statement. It can tell us a whole bunch. So first what we're going to do is I'm just going to take one triangle and I'm just going to label it ABC, however makes me happy at the time. Now, to label the other triangle, I have to use my first one as reference. If you notice right here, A comes first, and so does D when naming each of the triangles in the congruent statement. That matters. The way that we write congruent statements really, really matters. So, angle A is this angle that's kind of a rightish angle. So that means that down here, that's going to be D. Angle B comes second, so that means it's going to match up with angle E. Hey, buddy. So, since B is kind of that short distance away, that means that E is going to be this kind of short distance away over here. Oh. Hang on, there's a cat on me. Come here, buddy. Can you move? Can you move for me, bud? Thank you. Okay. So, now, C comes last, so does F. So C is that long distance away, so F is going to be that long distance away. So my corresponding parts are going to be congruent, so A is going to be congruent to D, B is going to be congruent to E, and C is going to be congruent to F. So those are my corresponding angles. Angle A is congruent to angle D. Angle B is congruent to angle E. Quit rubbing your face on the iPad, bud. Angle C is congruent to angle F. Alright. Buddy, I'm a little busy. I'll give you attention later. I'm sorry if the purring is loud on there. Okay, so corresponding sides. So we can kind of match them up looking at, like between one arc mark and two arc marks. AB is going to be congruent to DE. So that's going to be corresponding sides. DE, come on. There we go. BC is going to be congruent to EF. And then last, AC will be congruent to FD. Alright, those are all my corresponding angles and all my corresponding sides. So, in order for two things to, figures to be congruent, all of their corresponding angles have to be congruent, and all their corresponding sides have to be congruent. So, that's what we're going to check for over here on this guy. So, I'm not going to answer, are they congruent figures and all of that sort of stuff until I can write all this stuff out. So, first what I know is that angle D is most definitely congruent to angle H. So I've got that rocking for me. Now, we harped on these different types of angles for a while. And right here, you might notice a certain type of angle, buddy. Sorry. These are vertical angles. Remember, vertical angles are also going to be congruent. Now, don't put angle F is congruent to angle F. Because there's a whole bunch of different angles right there that could be angle F. So you can either name it DFE if you'd like. You could name it the other angle GFH if you'd like. I just like to make my life easier, so I put a 1 and a 2 in here and label up my diagram. So that way I can use that to my advantage. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So really make sure you're marking up your diagrams and writing stuff all over those. So notice what we have here. We have two angles in one triangle congruent to two triangles in another triangle. So, or two angles in another triangle. I don't know what I said. There's a reason I'm homesick. Okay, so since I've got these two sets of angles congruent, by the third angle theorem, I know that angle G is going to be congruent to angle E. Fantastic. So now the sides. So it showed me right here that DE and GH were congruent. So DE congruent to GH. Over here they have marked that DF and FH are congruent, so DF congruent to FH. And then my last set, EF right here was congruent to FG. So EF congruent to FG. Good deal. So, since I have all my sets of angles, of corresponding angles congruent, all my sets of corresponding sides congruent, that means that, yes, they are congruent figures. So, in my explain, that's going to be all, oopsies, corresponding parts are congruent. So now to write the congruent statement, we're going to keep an eye on our angles. So this first triangle, I'm going to name DEF, is congruent to. Now, if you remember in that last example, I said that the way that we write that congruent statement is super important because it gives us a lot of information. So, angle D is congruent to angle H. So, since D comes first, H comes first in the next one. E comes second, so G will come second here. F comes last, so F will come last. Alright. Now, over here on this next one, we have to ask ourselves, alright, so congruent figures are the exact same size and shape. Are these two things the exact same size and shape? Well, no. One fits inside of the other, so they're not the same size and shape. So they're not the same size. Alright. Alright, so here we go. So they're going to tell me that these two triangles are congruent. So I'm going to use, whoopsies, I'm going to use what it told me again. M and J are going to be congruent. So I'm going to mark that, M and J. K and E are going to be congruent. So I'm going to mark K and E. And that means that J, what the heck, L and T are, since those are my last ones, those guys are going to be congruent as well. So, a little note that I just want to share with you real quick. When I put an equals sign, I am looking for a number or a measure of some kind. If I put a congruent sign, I am looking for a figure. So over here, when I'm asking that L is congruent, angle L is congruent to what, I'm going to look for another angle for it to be congruent to. Sorry, I had to pause for a second, so I'm probably repeating myself right now. So, angle L, if we look at our picture, is going to be congruent to angle T, a figure. So I'm not going to put any sort of number there. MK, so MK is right here, so that's going to match up over here with JE. So since I have a congruent symbol, I want a figure, JE. MK is going to be congruent to JE. Over here on this next one, it says ME is, or the measure of angle E is equal to something. So I'm going to look at angle E. Angle E is congruent to angle K. So since angle K is 32 degrees, that means that angle E is 32 degrees. So that's going to be 32 degrees right here. ML is going to correspond with JT over here. So they're going to be congruent. And so since it says ML is equal to, I want a number there. And since they're corresponding and congruent, that means that ML is going to be 6 centimeters. 6 centimeters. Now we're going to go back through and rewrite this congruent statement. I'm going to write this out just once so you know. This is called a congruence statement. So, triangle. Let's see. So, E is corresponding with K. So, since E comes first, K is going to come first. T corresponds with L. So, since T comes second, L comes second. J corresponds with M. So, J comes last, M comes last. And now we can do the exact same thing, because I'm looking for angle JTE is congruent to angle. Well, angle J corresponds with M. And then T corresponds with L. And then M corresponds with K. So angle JTE is congruent to angle MLK. So these congruent statements, writing them in the correct order is super duper important. So I've got A and K. Those come first, so those are congruent. So I've got A and K. Alright. Then I've got B corresponding with J. So B will be congruent to angle J. C and H match up. 1, 2, 3. So that's C and H. 1, 2, 3. So then we got D and L. Those are going to be congruent. Angle D is congruent to angle L. Okay. So I want to find X and Y. So here's X. That's between J and K. So that's going to match up with this 9 over here. So to solve for X, since they're congruent, we do what we do with congruent things, set them equal. So I'm going to have 4X minus 3 equals 9. So then I'm going to add 3. So 4x equals 12. Divide by 4 on both sides. X is going to be equal to 3. Now I want to find y. So I've got this 5y minus 12. And I need to set that equal to something. Well, H and C are corresponding. So I'm going to set 5y minus 12 equal to 113. So first I'll add 12. So 5y equals 125. And And then I divide by 5, so I end up with 25 right there. So we found x and y, yay. All right. Let's see. Let's try to find a first. So I've got 4a minus 4. Now, that that angle with a in it was y. So what is y corresponding with? Y is corresponding with s. So I'm going to have to set those two guys equal to each other. So I have 4a minus 4, and I'll set that equal to 48. Cool. So I've got 4a equals 52 after I add 4 on both sides. Then I'll divide by 4. I will get 13. Now let's try to find b. So b is right here in angle z. Z is corresponding with t, so I'm going to use angle t over here. So I've got that 5b minus 3, and I'll set that equal to, I believe that's a 62. Or we'll just be wrong together, it'll be fine. So then we'll add 3 on both sides. So 5b will be equal to 65. Divide by 5 on both sides. B will be equal to also 13, I think. Unless I'm having a moment. I have no idea. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay, and then I need to find C. So 4C is this XZ. XZ is going to match up with RT over here. So I'm going to set 4C minus 4 equal to 28. So then I'll add 4 on both sides and get that 4C equals 32. Divide by 4 on both sides, so C will be equal to 8. Alright, so we just gotta write some congruent statements, find the value of x, and then we are out of here. So, first I'll write my congruent statement, triangle. This first one you can name however you want, so I might just do U, V, W is congruent to. Now, U was congruent to Z, so that means Z needs to come first. V was congruent to Y, so Y needs to come next. So that means W is corresponding with X. So now what we'll do is we know that X and W are corresponding. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to find out what angle W is. So I will take 54 plus 67. So let's see. It's 121. Take 180 minus 121. I'm left with 59. Alright, so it's going to be 59 right here. So in order to find x, I'm going to set 4x minus 5 equal to 59. So then I'll add 5 on both sides. So 4x equals 64. Divide by 4 on both sides. So x will equal 16. Alright, we'll write a congruent statement over here first. So I've got A, B, C. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. Let's see. A matches up with L, so L has to come first. B matches up with M, so M has to come second. C matches up with K, so K has to come last. Alright. So once again, we're in that situation where I've got C and I've got K. So let's see, I've got to add up 58 and is it 74? 74. And then I will take 180 minus that 132. So we've got 48. So then I will solve. I will take that 5x minus 2. Set that equal to 48. Add 2 on both sides. So 5x equals 50. And then divide by 5. So x equals 10. Alright, so you guys are still going to have your quiz on Friday. Remember, it is evens on day 2, odds on day 3. Okay? Miss you. I'll see you Monday. Bye.